Hey everybody, I'm Jason Mefford, and I'm back with Brad Miller, Walking a Spiritual Path. And today we wanted to talk about a topic that I know both Brad and I are still navigating and trying to figure out, but it's kind of the difference between feeling and sensing. Okay, and we may use some different words in this, so bear with us as we try to explain what we mean by some of these words as well. But maybe to start off, Brad, I mean, you brought this up. How do you kind of define or see the difference between feeling versus sensing?
Well, yeah, I think we use a lot of the words interchangeably, and it gets a lot of confusion. We talk about feeling as like, I feel cold or I feel sad. When I think maybe a better way, the sensations or emotions. You talk
Hmm.
about, sadness being an emotion as opposed to being a feeling, and just the way that we use the words in the English language, and I don't know if other languages have similar issues like this, but I think it's really easy to kind of start getting them confused together. Which one are we talking about here? And specifically, I think today we want to make a distinction between feeling as in the emotions, and specifically when it comes to um, fear-based emotions and the thoughts that kind of arise from that, and sensing the stuff, the kind of the intuitive things that we kind of like to talk about in this podcast, the nudges, the hints, the visions, the sound things that you might hear, the knowings that you receive, those kind of things separate, and how you use each of those, when we're making decisions, and how that can impact kind of the decision that you end up making.
Yeah, because I think and I think to kind of throw another kind of aspect to it is, like you said, a lot of times we use these words interchangeably, but they're
Mhm.
not. And so again, everybody can use the words they want to use, but we really have to kind of understand, what it means. If there's a word that resonates with people listening more, then they should use that word. But to kind of explain, the difference, and one other way that I try to think about it is this something going on in my head, or is this something going on in my heart? Right? And so most of the time, the intuition, the knowings, those kind of things come when we're really heart centered and not when we're thinking in our head. And I think where this really gets confusing is a lot of times we think we're in our heart, but we're still in our head.
Mhm.
Right?
Yep.
And so, some of the times, as an example, right, is, you use the emotion of sadness, right? And so we might be sitting there and thinking, oh, well, I'm feeling sad right now. But why am I feeling sad right now? Well, because something happened that I didn't want to happen, or I'm afraid that something is going to happen, right? And anytime that we start kind of going through that um, sort of logic, right, we find ourselves back in our head. And really, the longest distance is the 17 inches from our head to our heart. Okay, that's what I was taught by my mentor. Is the longest distance is really the 17 inches between. And again, for some people, it might be different depending on how tall you are, right?
Really long necks and things like that. Yeah.
Really long necked people, but the important thing is, how much can we do from our heart space as opposed to our head space when we do spend, most of our time in our mind, which is leading to certain feelings or other things like that. And I know, as we were talking before we hit record, Brad, if you want to maybe give a
Mhm.
little bit more context, because I think this ends up uh, leading into maybe decisions people make,
Mhm.
right? As well is they think they're making a decision based on what we're calling a sensing or a knowing, when really they're actually making the decision based on a feeling. They're still stuck in their head, and it's not
Mhm.
actually any kind of intuition that's leading them to make the decision.
Yeah, and I mean, an issue and again, part of it is distinguishing. I know we've talked about this in the past about distinguishing what actually is some sort of a sense. What is a nudge? An intuitive hit, using your intuition. Like, what does that mean for you? Um, because like you said, it is a lot different of a decision that you're going to get if it's made from something like that versus if it is an emotion based. I think most emotion based decisions are based out of fear. And so if you're confusing the two and you're thinking, hey, these decisions I'm making, I'm doing it because of these are this information coming to me, but really it's because you've got fear, you're full of fear, and so your brain is thinking about ways to avoid the fear, to minimize it, or whatever. That's going to get you a much different kind of an outcome. And so how do you tell the difference between your head, the fear, the emotions, and the heart, the knowings, the nudges, the connecting with higher senses, higher consciousness, things like that. And that's the question. I mean, that's the whole key here is distinguishing from the two. And I know we've talked in the past about we try to give examples of that for us, what works for us, but some of it is just getting to know yourself, listening to what's coming to you, and thinking, is this really a knowing, or is this? And again, I use fear because that's kind of, I think, the most common feeling that comes and kind of influences our decisions, or is this something that's based on fear?
Mhm. Well, and I think too, it's maybe we can share some different experiences here of some of the ways that we've done this or tried to come up with it. And so this kind of story popped into my head. So some people are going to think I'm crazy, but whatever, right? Um, I think one of the keys for me is if the answer you're getting or the knowing that you're having is something that is completely outside of the realm of possibility for you, chances are it may be coming from that intuition standpoint. And so, what do I mean? Is I was doing a past life regression session with somebody one time where I was the person, right, that was kind of
Mhm.
going back. And so I remember the sense of being a general in the Roman Empire. Okay. Um, Again, kind of weird in that, well, I kind of knew that I've probably incarnated in different civilizations over a period of time. So not really, that unusual. Maybe you could say that that was me still getting in my brain, right? Of logically thinking, well, of course, if I've incarnated, lots of different times, the Roman Empire lasted for, I don't know, five,
Mhm.
600
The odds say,
years.
yeah, probably something in
Odds
there.
odds would say, yeah, I probably lived in the Roman Empire once, twice, 10 times, I don't know, right? But my logic would tell me that that's that's probably right. But then I'm still in my head, right?
Mhm.
And so I remember as I was going through this and I was kind of being asked questions, about it and what I was sensing about it, I remembered some different experiences, right? That I had been killed and my men had avenged me. And my men, saw me as a wonderful leader, right? And again, okay, maybe you could kind of say, well, this is kind of, logic again, right? That I would want to believe that I was a good leader. I would
Ego,
want
maybe
to
even.
believe,
Yeah.
yeah, from an ego standpoint, right? But we ended up, going on and on and on. And I think one of the questions I was asked or something I was sensing was a name, because I think the person that was walking me through this said something like, well, what was your name? And this name just popped into my head. And again, it's a Roman sounding name, but I had never heard of this name before in my life, right?
Mhm.
Um, so, okay, outside of my normal realm of possibility, right, is that, okay, it sounds Romanesque, but I've never heard that before, right? And so, again, as I went through the session, I kind of had these different senses or knowings of little things about who I may have been in a previous incarnation, right? And again, it doesn't matter. That was then, this is now, right? I focus on Jason now. But what was interesting is, again, I was a little bit skeptical. And so I'm like, well,
Mhm.
this is kind of weird, in a way. And so I did some Google searching on this name. And guess what I found?
Roman general.
Somebody, Roman general with that name, who was murdered, who was avenged by his men. Now, that was completely outside of my realm of at least conscious knowing, right? That for me to make that up is pretty implausible, right? And so again, like I said, any of these times like this, um, when I receive things that are outside of what I would normally logically think, or they come quick, right, as a knowing, then I can usually trust it, right? It was the same thing. I was focused on a different part in history as I was thinking about it, and I had the same kind of thing where I wasn't necessarily looking for an answer per se, but I was just wondering. I was just curious. And it was the same thing after having that experience. I was like, oh, I wonder if I lived in this particular time period. And I kind of get I got the feel in my body like, yep, that's right. Because I get a certain feeling in my body when I'm getting kind of confirmation of something
Mhm.
that I'm thinking. I'm like, and so I got that confirmation. I'm like, oh, that's interesting. I wonder what my name was. Boom, a name comes into my head and I feel it again, a first name. And I'm like, well, that's interesting. It's kind of a common first name. I wonder what my last name was. Boom. And the last name hit me. And I'm like, whoa, right? So to me, I mean, those are a couple of experiences where, I feel like, again, that I was sensing more than I was feeling because the answers that were coming to me were not anywhere in my logical conscious mind, right? And
Right.
I don't
Yeah.
know, Brad, how some experiences that maybe you've had to try to help highlight, but that's at least one thing that I've kind of seen in being able to discern whether it's just a feeling in my head or whether I really am in my heart and it's intuition coming in.
Mhm. Yeah. No, that's a really good a good way, because like you said, there's things that you wouldn't have known, wouldn't have your head, that you can then kind of sort of verify and kind of, you know.
Well, yeah, I never heard of this person in the Roman Empire. I mean, yeah, there's some information out online about him, but I never learned about him in the history books or anything like
Mhm.
that, right? And so it's not like where a lot of people may, and I've seen this a lot, where I think people want things to be true,
Mhm.
right? And so I've seen different people like that to say, oh, well, Rome, well, I must have been a leader in Rome, so I must have been Julius Caesar. And it's like, how many people think they were Julius Caesar in a previous life? I mean, come on. One being was, okay, give me a break. You can't have 300 people all thinking that they were Julius Caesar. Somebody's wrong,
Mhm.
right? But that's where again our logical mind and what we want to have happen may end up getting in the way. And I think that's another trick with this is when we have an attachment
Mhm.
or we have some sort of expectation of what we want the answer to be, then we kind of think ourselves into that being the answer as opposed to really allowing the answer to come through.
Yeah, the expectation point I think is a really good one. If you've got something that you are kind of thinking that, hey, this is what it probably was, this is what it should be. Obviously I was Julius Caesar in a part, I mean, because look at me and I get to
Of
know,
course you
like,
were, right?
right, like, everything else. And you try to think of, you kind of have this idea that this is, it's just obvious that this is what it has to be. Um, I think a lot of that is, again, you kind of, your ego's getting in there in the way, your head's getting in there, you're overthinking it. It's not really those sensings that you're getting for something like that. Um, yeah, I was trying to think of examples as you're going through there, and a specific thing didn't really jump into my head. Um, but for me, I think a lot of it is trying to separate out the emotion out of it. So if something comes and there's clearly emotion behind it, then that's not a sense. That's my head. That's me getting in the way. Um, the things that are hits or downloads, or whatever you want to call them, they tend to be without emotion. There's no um fear, sadness, anger, happiness. I mean, even the positive stuff, there's really nothing behind it. It just is.
Mhm.
Um, and something comes, like I know we've talked in the past about gone crystal shopping and gone to the crystal store, and something just kind of called to me, and I was like, this is calling to me. I need to take it home. Like, there's no emotion behind it, like, oh, this is awesome, I found something I need to be taking home, or oh my God, now I gotta be spending $500 on this stuff, and like nothing like that. It's just like, that's what it is. Like, this is something that needs to happen, and trying to separate that emotion stuff out of it, to me, is one way that I can kind of tell what's what
Yeah, well,
there.
and it's funny because you bring up the crystal, and I know we've talked about that a few times before.
Mhm.
So if you missed that whole story, go back and listen to the previous episodes, everybody. But it's funny because when I first started kind of down this path more seriously several years ago, um, I remember one of my friends, here I am again, right? I mean, both Brad and I are trained logical, and that's, kind of what we do, right? That's
Mhm.
been our training. And so it was the same thing, like, well, when I go into a crystal shop, how do I know what's supposed to come home to me, right? It's like I was expecting some kind of checklist or something, like, oh, okay, well, check,
need,
check, check,
need to pick
check.
up this today, and maybe I like,
Yeah, yeah, and then
one of
and then I'm
these and
just
one of
gonna I'm
those,
just
and
gonna know, and it's gonna be this logical process. And I remember one of my friends just looking at me and smiling and saying, "Jason, don't worry. They will tell you if they need to come home with you." And at first I'm like, "What?
right.
Just what are you talking about? No, I need a checklist or I need something, right?"
Mhm.
But the more I've leaned into it, and I have worked to get out of my brain and get out of some sort of a logical checklist I have to go through, I notice more and more that things look at me, right? And again, I don't hear an audible voice. It's not like, "Hey Jason, I'm the clear quartz over in the corner. You need to take
Mhm.
me home." No, it's not like that, right? But as I'm maybe scanning around the room, all of a sudden something kind of jumps out at me more than the other things do,
Mhm.
right? And then I can kind of sit with that and try to sense into it more. And it's even the same, way walking around my house, as an example, right? I mean, I've been doing some cleaning on my house. I like to clean my house, right?
Spring cleaning and all,
uh,
yeah.
Spring cleaning, hey, it's that time of year. And again, I've been working or training myself to do things more intuitively,
Mhm.
as opposed to just having the checklist. And so I would do a task, then I'd go sit out on the porch for a little while, and I'd ask myself a question. Okay, what do I need to do next? Right? And sometimes something would pop in, like, well, you got to go take care of this next. Okay, then I'd go take care of that next. But sometimes I'd even just be walking around the house, right? Like, last night, was it last night or the night before? I don't remember. Anyway, I was in the kitchen starting, or maybe it was in the morning, and I wasn't cooking or doing anything, but all of a sudden the stove just, the cooktop kind of said, "Hey, we need some love. Can you clean me?" Sort of a thing. And again, it wasn't an audible voice. It wasn't anything like that. But when I looked at the cooktop, I knew that it would be good for me to clean it right now. Why? I don't know. I don't need to know why. It wasn't that dirty, right? But for some reason, that was the best use of my time, at least intuitively at that point, right? So I went ahead and stopped and did that, right? And the more that I do that, the more that I listen to some of these things that are coming through, the more they do come through, and the
Mhm.
more aware I am of them and can just do them. And the more you do them, the more it comes through.
Yeah, we talked about this before about kind of how way you can kind of train yourself, but I do it every single day when it comes to picking out what I wear.
Uh-huh.
I think, I just kind of sit there and like, all right, what do I need to wear today? What am I going to wear today? And I just kind of wait for something to hit. And if it doesn't right away, maybe I'll open up my drawer and kind of look at my shirts and say, just kind of look and see which if something jumps out at me. Oftentimes, by kind of habit default, we kind of grab things off the top. I'll see what's on the top and if anything jumps out, or if I see something maybe just underneath, um, and I don't have attachment to it, like this shirt. I don't necessarily have an attachment to this shirt today, but as I was going through thinking about, hey, what am I going to wear today? For this podcast recording, like I need, I'm going to wear this shirt today.
Mhm.
Okay.
Well, and
That's cool.
it's the same thing because it was the clothing is the same thing. I had a couple of experiences this week where um I was going someplace and I was like, oh, I wonder what I should wear. But I really don't think about or care about what I wear per se. But as I was, just kind of thinking about this upcoming event that I was going to, I kind of saw myself wearing a certain outfit, right? Which, again, I'm not that kind of person. I mean, I wear a lot of the same stuff all the time. People can attest. Go back and look at
Watch
the
us on
videos.
YouTube. You can see Jason's. Oh,
You can see that Jason doesn't change his wardrobe very much. But that kind of came up. Same thing. I was wearing another shirt yesterday, and it was like, well, it's not really dirty yet. I could wear it again. But when I was going to bed, because I kind of have this little ritual of folding my clothes and having them ready. So when I get up in the morning and I'm still really foggy headed and I can't think, all I have to do is
grab.
grab
Yeah.
grab the pile that I've already put out. And for some reason last night, again, logically, my mind would say, well, that t-shirt is still fine. You just wore it the one day, everything's fine. You didn't, everything's, you could wear it again.
Right.
But something in me said, nope, put that in the dirty clothes and open your drawer. And I opened the drawer. This wasn't the shirt that was on top, but it was the second one down, and this one jumped out at me. Right.
Not like literally jumped out of you, I'm assuming, out of
Well, sometimes things do literally jump out,
the.
but I don't know if I will
That's a
maybe
different
talk
topic,
about that's a
probably.
different topic. And
Different
yeah,
episode.
I've
Yeah.
I've had some physical 3D things move on me in ways that they physically shouldn't, but that might be for another episode.
Tune in next time if you want
Tune
to hear
in
about
next time
Jason's
when
flying
Jason talks
clothes
about
and.
his flying clothes. There we
Uh,
go.
but yeah, yeah. I mean, and kind of going back to the idea, we've got a lot. As professionals, as an accountant, as a lawyer, we're trained to think logically. We're trained to back up our decisions with evidence. In the law, what evidence you have, that's a big part of, we're going to trial. So we have to have evidence, we have to have proof. I know you do a lot of stuff with audit, so that's all about data and about proofs and things like that. And so it's very easy for us to jump immediately to, all right, well, what can I prove? What makes logical sense? Deductive reasoning. If A plus B equals C, like we tend to like things very logical and nice and neat like that. And when we try then to sometimes start being more intuitive, we can get caught in those fears and these emotions instead. We think that we're sensing things, but what we're actually doing is we're kind of tapping into the fear. Again, emotions in general, but fear is usually the one that I think probably impacts the most. But should I go this way or that way? and this way looks a little dark, and it looks like that there's maybe some street lights out, maybe the road's not in is good a condition, and so the feeling, oh well, can't be the way, because that's, it's got to be the other way. Well, is it an intuitive hit that you're supposed to be going to the left versus the right? Or is it that you're emotionally, you said, well, it's dark, it's kind of broke, the street's not in great repair, it's a bad part of town neighborhood I'm going through, I might get mugged, you start getting into the fears about why you're making these decisions instead. Um, and there's a lot of people who say, don't trust, you're making too many decisions based on your emotions, based on your fear, on your feelings. You need to be mostly more on data and on facts. Um, and I think that comes about because we're getting into those fears and the emotions, versus if we're actually getting into the sensings. The sensings are, I think, the better way to turn, better than the data, better than the facts, because facts lie. I mean, I'm sure we've all seen it. Things that we think are facts sometimes aren't facts.
Mhm.
In a lawsuit, you can have three eyewitnesses see the same accident, and all of them describe it differently, even though they're all right there. The facts of what happened are different between all three, right? Um, and so sometimes you can't even trust the facts.
Well, and
But
so much of the time too, from psychology and your subconscious, we tend to gravitate towards evidence that supports the conclusion we want
correct.
to make. I mean, we see that all the time in the risk management side of things that I do. People will unconsciously, I mean, it's one of the unconscious biases that people have, is will tend to go towards or find data that supports the conclusion we want to make,
Mhm.
and we exclude everything else, and again, we try to analyze everything instead of trusting our gut, trusting our heart. And again, I don't know if I've
Mhm.
talked about it here, but if we think about our body, most people think of only the brain and our head, right? But a lot of people and a lot of ancient traditions talk about the head, the heart, and the gut
Mhm.
being three different points. And so there's some things in the English language, even, like again, people in risk management, very analytical, will say never trust your gut. Always must be data and confirmed,
Right.
right? I'm the opposite, where I'm like, trust your gut, right? I mean, it's kept humans alive for millions of years, because when you get that sick feeling in your stomach and something's wrong, right, you don't have to logically figure it out. Right. And again, I remember one of the stories that you told before about going into a store, and all of
Mhm.
a sudden you got this weird feeling in your stomach. I think your temperature started going up, you started sweating, and you're like, I got to get out of here.
My watch was yelling, saying, "Hey, your heart rate! Oh, heart
You're
rate's
yeah,
kind of
oh,
elevated. Are
that's
you
right, because your
okay?"
heart rate elevated too, right? And your
Mhm.
alarm went off on your watch. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, at that point, you could say, well, there's logically no reason for me to feel this way. And so I'm going to suppress these emotions or these feelings or this knowing.
Right.
But you didn't. You're like, nope, something's off. I'm leaving. I don't have to
Peace
have
out.
data.
Yeah.
I'm out.
Hmm.
Right. And I think, a lot of times we have little flashes of that in our life, but we tend to kind of go back to, I think, sometimes believing something that we're feeling or thinking as being intuition, when really all we're doing, like you said, is giving into our fear
Hmm.
and doing what we want to do. And I've seen this in some of the major decisions in my life that I've made is, man, I really didn't want to make certain decisions. And so sometimes for
Hmm.
years, I would fight what I knew I was supposed to do. I'd fight it because it's like, no, I don't want to have to do that again. I don't want to go there. I don't want to whatever, right?
Hmm.
But it was me, it was my feelings, it was my thoughts that were getting in the way of what the universe was telling me over and over and over and over again, right? And again, sometimes it's a gentleness and sometimes it's a two before to the head, right? And what my intention is to learn quicker so the two before doesn't have to come out. It hurts when you get hit in the head with a two before, right?
Right.
Um, and actually just go along with it because, and sometimes logically the decision didn't make any sense, but it doesn't matter whether it makes logical sense or not if it's the thing you're supposed to do.
Right. Yep. So, I mean, hopefully we've kind of explained what we're trying to hit here. Um,
Well, we give
and
you some experiences of some
yeah.
things, that we've kind of gone through. And, I think this is honestly one of the things that is we work with our whole life.
Mhm.
Um, you know, and there's reasons for it, but one of my friends just told me this last week or so, something interesting that I hadn't thought about before. But the stronger that we become, the stronger our tonal becomes too. And so, we think we're getting out of our head, and we're doing a better job of getting out of our head. But we end up back in our head much more than we realize because that tricky tonal is getting better at tricking us too into thinking that we've learned it when it's a lifelong process. That's why it's a journey. That's why it's
Mhm.
a path, right? I mean, those are terms that a lot of ancient traditions use. Is It's not a destination, it's a path, it's a journey throughout our whole life of
Mhm.
continuing to learn things. Sometimes we encounter things that are similar to what we've encountered before, and so it makes it a little easier for us to get through. um, but it's constantly learning and really getting out of our head, getting into our heart, getting into our gut, sensing and acting on those things that we're actually sensing.
Yeah. Yeah. So if somebody says stop with the feeling and make a decision based on your head or on logic, um, you can ignore them. Uh, and just focus on, like I said, the gut feelings.
Mhm.
Kind of work out what is emotion, what's in your head, and versus what is those things you're actually getting, the intuitive hits, the knowings, the sensings, and um, yeah, like you said, it's a journey, it's a travel. It's not a spiritual sprint.
Nope.
Um, it's not even a marathon. It's um, a lifelong process.
Ultra marathon.
I mean, I suppose it depends on how long you ultimately are in this existence, on this planet. But yeah, I mean, it's something that we do from the day you're born all the way to the day that you transition on to something else. Um, and so,
Well, again, ultimately too, I mean, for those of you that are listening, we've kind of shared our examples. We've kind of shared some things that we went through. Brad shared with you a great little exercise that he does each day, as well with what he wants to wear. So, I mean, again, if you want to play with this, just start playing with it and see what
mhm,
happens. You can pick something like, what am I going to wear today? When you go to a restaurant, instead of trying to
mhm,
analyze the whole menu, you can just feel intuitively into it and just make a decision quicker,
mhm,
and just see where it goes. I think most of the time, I would say all of the time, that I have actually listened and I was actually sensing, things worked out better than I could have even imagined, right?
mhm,
Even when that fear was holding me back at the beginning, when I actually do move forward and take action on that sensing that I'm getting, things always turn out better than I thought they were going to.
yep. All right. Yeah, well, hey, thanks for listening, everybody. Hopefully you found this beneficial, this episode. Um, Trying to distinguish between your feeling, your sensing, those emotions, and what's actually coming to you. What really is intuitively there for you to be making decisions off of, because it's can be tough. Like I'm sure there's many times that I have had a feeling and I made a decision, but it was based on a fear or something like that, as opposed to actual, sense that I've been getting. And so just gotta work on it, practice it.
Well, and I think too, as a reminder at the end here, don't beat yourself up over it either.
Right.
I get this wrong every day. Still,
Multiple times. Yeah.
multiple times during the day. I'm getting better, right? But, it's part of the process. And so,
Mhm.
we don't have to beat ourselves up over it. When you learn mistakes are a part of life, and, when you find it, the next time you can do better.
Yep.
Because again, when you encounter the next thing that's similar to that on your path, you can choose to make a different choice at that point,
Mhm.
and not worry about the past, which no longer exists anyway. So,
That's right.
yeah.
Cool.
All right, so yeah, thanks everybody for listening, and we'll see you on the next episode. Have a great week, and start sensing into and getting from your head to your heart. We'll see you next time.
See you then.